Welcome to Dual Enrollment BIB 222, Bryan College Online. My name is Judd Davis, and I'm the facilitator of this in terms of preparing the material that you'll use over the course of this dual enrollment class. Very excited about our time together. I think we're going to have a great time as your teacher there uses this material. And let's dive in. We're going to look today at whole Bible biblical theology, the beginning and end of the Bible, how it comes together and how you understand the pieces. What we'll look at is observing the beginning and end and make some connections. As you go through your homework, the notebook, I want you to ask, what are some of the questions that you have as you read through the material? What are the connections that you see? And I trust that in the class period time together, you'll even make more connections. And what does it all mean for me as I read? What am I supposed to come away with all this? So I love to start out people talking about the Bible. I'd love to start out with this diagram because this is simply a visual representation of all the cross references in the Bible. And you can see the beginning of the Bible is very much connected to the end, and how over and over you're having retelling stories and similar stories. Once you understand that, the Bible is much easier to understand because you're realizing that these stories are retelling other stories. And when you do that for the beginning and end of the Bible, what you see is that both mention the tree of life. The only place in the Bible where the phrase the tree of life appears is in Genesis 1 and 2, and then in Revelation 21 and 22, where New Jerusalem is the restored Garden of Eden. Both texts have the river of life. Both have God communing with his people. Both have a cosmic wedding. I don't know if you ever thought about that, but the Bible begins with a wedding and it ends with a wedding. You have the power couple in Genesis 1 and 2, and then you have this ultimate power couple. You've got the dirt man and his wife who fail, and then you have the God man and his bride, the church, and they succeed. And then both texts mention the dragon / serpent. And so what you have is a connection between the beginning of the Bible and the end of the Bible. And once you begin to see that, as you read, you'll start asking the question, well, how does this relate to the beginning of the Bible? How does it relate to the end? In your homework, this is the template that I would like you to use. And I want the homework notebook to be the primary learning tool for this class. When you go through the material and you begin to make connections, that's where the majority of learning will occur. And so I've given you this template, and as you go through and read the passages, make some basic comments. How are any of the events people related to Christ and what he accomplished? Is it similar? Is it different? If the story is bad, how is the Old Testament story a contrast to what Christ did? For instance, when David stays home from battle, he falls into adultery and murder. Well, Jesus never stayed home from any battle. So you'll ask the question, how is today's passage related to the meta-narrative as a whole, as you begin to step back and try to look at the whole Bible at the same time? And how are you like any of the people in the story? Are you like the good characters, or perhaps often you may be like the bad characters in the story? And then one day, how will the transformation that Christ brings cause everyone in the story to reflect his image? when we do that, let me just, we come to Genesis 1. I just want to make some observations. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth was formless and void. This phrase is used elsewhere in the Hebrew Bible, tohu vabohu, of the land after it's fallen into judgment. And so it immediately raises the idea, what's going on here? And is the earth undeveloped, or why are they using these words? The earth was tohu vabohu, formless and void, and darkness was over the surface of the deep, and the Spirit of God was hovering over the surface of the waters. This word used of a mother hen hovering over her chicks in Deuteronomy. Then God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. God saw the light was good. God separated the light from the darkness. God called the light day, and the darkness he called night. There was evening and morning, day one. Well, let's observe some things. You'll want to get a good translation. So New American Standard's the most literal. NIV is the most readable. ESV is kind of halfway between the two. Any of these translations are good. Some are more paraphrases than others, but pick a good one. You may want to pick a couple of good ones on difficult passages, but read through, observe the text, and you'll start making connections. I want to help by making some observations that may or may not be available to you from the Hebrew text that may help as you read through some of this. Notice that the word God in Hebrew is the word Elohim, plural, but it goes with singular verbs, so it's in the beginning he created. There's only one person doing it, but that he is somehow being described of with this plural term. We'll look at that more in the subsequent video. And even the word Yahweh, YHWH, usually in our English Bibles, Lord in all caps, even that has this same phenomenon in that this is singular, but when you say it out loud, Adonai, that word actually technically is a plural, my lords, when spoken of. So you've got this strange thing whenever God's described. I think it's 6,000 times. He's being described as a singular and a plural at the same time. And as a reader, you wonder why that's the case. There are repeated phrases in Genesis 1, like there was evening and morning, day one. There's one day that omits that. Why is that the case? God saw that it was good. Interesting, one day omits that as well. God said 10 times in the text, and some people have pointed out that the 10 Commandments are called the 10 words in Hebrew, and so God gives the 10 words at Mount Sinai, and then in creation he creates the world with 10 words, and you wonder, is that coincidence or is that on purpose? God called things, that is, he named them. And when Adam is naming the animals, he's doing kind of a godlike thing. What's going on there? This phrase, God separated, light, darkness, waters above, waters below. What's going on? 2:4, these are the Toledoths. These are the generations of, and usually that Toledoth is like giving birth to something. And so how does the Toledoth version of the story relate? There does seem to be two accounts where you've got an account with Elohim as the actor, and then 2:5, you have the same event, but it's described as Yahweh Elohim. So what's going on there? Why do you have these very similar stories? And there's weird language about man. Sometimes he's called Adam, sometimes he's called the Adam. And you have this weird description of the woman being house built out of the man's essence. And so you look at that and you wonder, okay, well, what is all of this? And what I would like to persuade you of is that there's a Christocentric meta-narrative, that once you realize the beginning and end of the Bible are connected, and once you follow the advice of Jesus in Luke 24, that the whole thing is about him, you begin to ask these questions, and you say, okay, well, is God whispering the story of Jesus throughout all of these stories? And I can say, after having spent a lifetime in the original languages, that I believe that's absolutely the case. That if you go to the languages, try to volume read both testaments, what's going to happen is they're going to come together in a beautiful meta-narrative story, a story about Jesus. It can be off-putting. This is the language that the Old Testament is written in. Just thought I would read it out loud, just if you wanted to hear it. But this is Genesis 1:1-5. Bereshit bara Elohim et hashamayim ve'et haaretz ve'haaretz hayata tohu vabohu ve'hoshek al pnei tehom ve'ruach Elohim merachefet al pnei hamayim ve'yomer Elohim yehi or vayehi or ve'yar Elohim et haor kitov ve'yavdel Elohim bein haor uvein hahoshek Vayikara Elohim la'or yom ve'lachoshek kara vayila vayihi erev vayihi boker yom echad. You can hear how beautiful that is, and you can hear the Elohim, that im ending is plural, and it's like, okay, well, what does all this mean? Well, I want you to know that what I believe and what Brian College has always believed is that the best commentary on the Bible is the Bible. If you want to understand what the Bible really says, well, look at what the Bible says about what it says. And if you do that, the best way to do it is to start looking up cross-references, find a good translation, and look and see how it's being used elsewhere. And when you do that, there are two passages that just jump out to me. One is John 1:1-5. You've got the text in Genesis, and then John seems to be giving a commentary. In fact, in the original languages, it's the same exact starting point. In the beginning, God, and this is this plural word, and then created is he created. And look what John does with that. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was in the beginning with God. All things were made through him. So you've got this plurality within the more basic unity of God. And I wonder if John is explaining this. You've got in him was life, and the life was the light of men. You've got this, the light shines in the darkness. It seems like these passages are connected. You might, with your fellow students and with the facilitator, dual enrollment facilitator, ask the question, why? Why is this happening? Best commentary on the Bible is the Bible. Another passage, 2 Corinthians 4:6, Paul gives his reading. He says, we proclaim not ourselves, but Jesus Christ is Lord, and ourselves your servants for Christ's sake. For God, who said, let light shine out of the darkness, has shone in our hearts to give light of the knowledge of the glory of God in the face of Jesus Christ. So you've got kind of this reading that Paul believes this is foreshadowing our salvation. God coming to something that's dead, dark, without forming void, and God speaking light and life into it. Beginning and end of the Bible, you have this idea of the Garden of Eden in this special river. The problem is when you begin to look for this river and draw it out, and you try to go to a map and find where this is, it's just really not there. It's interesting. This was my drawing years before I saw the Anchor Bible one. Like they're almost identical. When you look at that, that's kind of plain language. You've got a river that splits and goes around all these lands. But the problem is when you try to find that on a map, it just doesn't seem to be there. So this is the ESV Study Bible, and this is the ESV Study Bible Atlas. These are the main ideas. I think you make a really good case that there's some kind of connection between Eden and the land flowing with milk and honey. There are cherubs there, gold, bdellium, onyx, the immediate presence of God. By the time you get to Ezekiel 47, and then in the New Testament, of course, it's pointing to New Jerusalem. And could it be that that's part of God's glory as author, that he's concealing mysteries for us to find in his word? And if we do that, we read all these verses, all of these verses are going to connect that special river with Jerusalem. And what's interesting about that is if Jerusalem and the original location of Eden are connected, man, you've got all kinds of meta-narrative things. Adam sinned near that place, and Jesus, as the new Adam, died near that place. Adam came to a tree and spiritually murdered the entire human race. Jesus, by being murdered, unmurders. Adam comes to a garden of pleasure, and he makes it a tomb, and Jesus comes to a tomb and throws open the gates of paradise. And then when you look at the description of New Jerusalem, thing you might want to talk about with your teacher there, that this heavenly Jerusalem is described as a cube, 12,000 feet squared. Well, it's interesting that the Holy of Holies is a cube. In fact, as I know, it's the only cube in the Bible, 15 feet by 15 feet by 15 feet, and now this one's 12,000 stadia. A stadion is 607 feet, and so you can kind of do the math. And when you do it, it's like 1,380 miles. And here, the college is in Dayton, Tennessee, and 1,380 miles away is like Winnipeg, Canada. I mean, you're talking about a huge cube. If you built it to size and put it on the globe, I mean, it's like this tall, a city that tall, and you've got, the International Space Station, like that city is like just beyond imagination. That's how big it was when John saw it. Who knows how big it is now? So when you're reading this story and you kind of track down some of these details, start asking yourself, well, how does all that connect with Jesus? Why is Jesus tempted 40 days? And why is he tempted by Satan? And is that recapitulating Adam, or is it maybe recapitulating Israel in the garden? Why is this person, described like the tree of life that's prospering? And I just say my own approach to the Bible is the reason we put so much faith in commentaries, because we doubt our own ability to read. I want to help you read better, and I'm certain that the dual enrollment teacher wants that as well. So I encourage you, think about these things and see the connections. And I hope you have a great day and look forward to talking to you next.